Alright guys, before we get into the show, just off the bat, if the camera video quality feels kind of off in this video compared to my others, it's because my other camera, my phone, is actually in the shop right now getting repaired. So thank you so much for sticking with me on this video while that camera does get repaired. But without further ado, let's get into the review of Fit for an Autopsy's Oh, What the Future Holds. So Fit for an Autopsy is a deathcore band from New Jersey, and this is their 6th studio album. Now, as many of you know, I do not like deathcore at all, and there are many reasons why, and I made a whole video on it that I will link up here that you can go check out. But Fit for an Autopsy has released a few songs that have always caught my ear in a way other deathcore bands haven't. Fit for an Autopsy still follows that same deathcore formula that I'm not a big fan of, but they add like prog elements here and there. Maybe not prog is the right word, but they definitely switch it up a little bit with how they layer their phrasing and their measures. It's definitely not the same as Suicide Silence or Signs of the Swarm or anything like that. And so I was looking forward to this album, and I really wanted to see if they were going to take their sound in more of a Whitechapel, Hickory Creek direction. So let's dive into the good about this album. And so first, I want to compliment the drumming on this album because it was really good. It wasn't full of just like blast beats and blasting your face as much as they possibly could, like in other deathcore albums and other deathcore bands. There was a lot of effort put into the rhythm of this drumming as opposed to what I usually hear from these type of bands. I definitely think the drumming was overall the best part of this album because it was the least formulaic of all the instruments. Josean Orta definitely showed his talent on this album, and he definitely showed that he's not like other deathcore drummers in that sense either. One of my biggest complaints about deathcore is that it is too formulaic, but on this album, Fit for an Autopsy clearly put in the effort to break that formula, and it was really good in a lot of places. And that was more present on the song Two Towers than any other song on the album. This was far and away the best song off of this album. It was so refreshing to hear a deathcore band actually take deathcore in a direction that wasn't relying on the same chugga-chugga scale, chugga-chugga woolly-doodly-doodly-doo that other deathcore bands always do. There was tons of great melodies placed all throughout this album, and great melodies are something that just isn't there in deathcore 90% of the time. But Fit for an Autopsy really nailed the melody on this album, and that was present on Two Towers, but it was also incredibly present on Collateral Damage as well. And the solos were really good here as well. They weren't mind-blowing virtuoso solos that you would see in other bands, but it was really good. It was really enjoyable, and it really added to the music. It wasn't a distraction. It felt so in the music. It felt so a part of the music. It was a part of the melodies that they were placing inside of each song. To be honest, there was a lot of places in this album where I was really impressed. But unfortunately, there was still so much left on the table here, and that's what I really want to get into with this album. Alright, so I mentioned that deathcore is super formulaic, and there were places in this album where Fit for an Autopsy really broke that formula, but they didn't break it enough. This is still deathcore. This still does indeed have the chugga chugga doodly 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 that all deathcore has constantly. Like, you can see them trying to break that mold. You can see them trying to break that deathcore formula, but the fact is that they're still trying to stay in deathcore, and that holds them back so much. It sucks, because if they wanted to break out and make a prog metal album or a death metal album or a tech death album, I think they really could, and I think they could do a really good job of it. And I think they're trying to do that in some places on this album, but also trying to be deathcore. Like, they're trying to be prog deathcore or technical deathcore, and it just doesn't work. The vocals are pretty lame because they're typical deathcore vocals, and there were some spots when it was really good, but most of the time it was that muffled shouting, trying too hard to be death metal but not be death metal vocals that you usually see in deathcore. And earlier I said that the solos were really good and there were a ton of great melodies, but overall the riffing was incredibly predictable. Like, I could tell what was coming every single time. And that's what deathcore is, unfortunately. It's predictable. That's absolutely what 90% of deathcore is. And if Fit for an Autopsy wants to make better albums, they need to leave deathcore. Unfortunately, I know a lot. Hey, listen, I know there's some deathcore fans watching this that aren't gonna like it, but deathcore is incredibly limiting as a genre. And this album suffers from a savage case of "and justice for all" syndrome, where there's like no bass. Like, as hard as I could, like, I have really good headphones that I review these albums with, and I could not find bass for the life of me. It's really unfortunate because, like I said, I think that Fit for an Autopsy could make a fantastic album. I think these guys are good musicians, but they need to leave deathcore behind and try something else. Overall, this was a refreshing take on deathcore from Fit for an Autopsy, and I liked what they were trying to do in a lot of cases, but it wasn't enough. The genre that they are trying to stay in held them back too much, and at the end of the day, it was still a deathcore album. Adding up each individual score of each individual song and dividing by the number of songs on the album, we get a final score of 7.4 out of 10, which on the heaviest show in the universe rating scale is not bad. Fit for an Autopsy shows promise on this album, and they have showed promise to me before on a number of different songs. But overall, as an album, they stick too much to deathcore. It's predictable, it's boring, and it's formulaic. But those special moments where they try to break the mold are enough to keep this album as a decent album, as a good listen, as one that I would recommend any metalhead try to listen to. I really appreciate you sticking around, watching the video till the end. If you haven't yet, go down below and sauce me one of these bad boys and smash that subscribe button for more fantastic metal reviews, discussion, and theories about the greatest GOAT genre in the history of the universe. Until next time, long live metal.